The first warning is the acrid smell of wet thatch burning in the cold morning air. You are a 7-year-old girl on the coast of Ireland, and the world you know has just ended. The men swarming from the ships do not speak your language. They bark commands in harsh tones that sound like growling wolves. They move with terrifying efficiency, cutting down resistance and hurting women like livestock. The rough rope biting into your wrists marks the boundary between your life as a free woman and your new existence as inventory. This is the Viking Age, stripped of its Hollywood glamour, a gritty reality built on the backs of stolen women. For centuries, we have celebrated the explorers and kings, ignoring the dark shadow that followed their ships. We praise their martial prowess, yet turn a blind eye to the human fuel that powered their expansion. The reality is that the Viking economy was dependent on the systematic abduction of human beings, a nightmare of displacement and violence that historians are only now fully reconstructing. But this brutality wasn't just random violence. It was the result of a calculated investment that viewed you not as a casualty of war, but as a return on capital. Vikings were not just warriors. They were human traffickers on an industrial scale. Wealthy chieftains pooled significant capital to build longships, not just to plunder gold, but to secure human cargo. These ships were engineering marvels, designed with a shallow draft to slide silently up rivers, bypassing coastal defenses to strike communities 100 miles inland. They targeted monasteries and isolated villages because they were soft targets, reservoirs of labor and flesh that could be harvested with minimal risk. The historical record supports this grim reality. The Irish Annals of Ulster contain an entry from 821 AD that chills the blood. Vikings carried off a great host of women. This phrase appears repeatedly, indicating mass abduction events designed to depopulate entire regions. The return on investment for a successful slaving raid was incredibly high, fueling the Norse economy and cementing the power of warlords. This was their business model: organized, predatory, and immensely profitable. However, once the raid was over and the ships turned toward the sea, the true nightmare for the captives was only just beginning. The moment a woman was captured, she ceased to be human. She became a thrall. In Old Norse law, a slave was referred to as fe, a word that interchangeably meant cattle, money, and property. She had no legal rights, no family, and no name other than the one her master gave her. Her master could beat, rape, or kill her without penalty, just as a farmer might dispose of a broken tool. She was property that breathes, a living asset to be utilized until she broke. Bound and thrown into the bottom of a longship, she faced weeks of exposure to the freezing North Atlantic. Crammed in with livestock and plunder, she endured seasickness, hypothermia, and terror. Many did not survive, their bodies tossed overboard like spoiled cargo. Those who survived faced the slave markets. Dublin wasn't just a settlement. It was the western hub of a human misery network where captives were sorted, graded by their teeth and hair, and sold like cattle. Yet, Dublin was merely the gateway to a much larger, global web of suffering that stretched further than anyone at the time could imagine. The reach of this trade was staggering. The Volga trade route was a superhighway of suffering, funneling women from Britain and the Slavic lands down through Russia to the wealthy markets of Constantinople and Baghdad. The Vikings, known in the East as the Rus, traded blonde-haired, fair-skinned women for Arab silver and Chinese silk. Tens of thousands of Islamic silver dirham coins found buried in Scandinavia today are the cold receipts for these sold lives. We have eyewitness testimony to this brutality. The 10th century Arab diplomat Ahmad ibn Fadlan witnessed this trade firsthand on the banks of the Volga. He described Rus traders publicly abusing their female captives to demonstrate their value to potential buyers, a sickening sales pitch performed on a human body. For the exported, the fate was to be sold into harems thousands of miles from home, with no hope of return. For the women who weren't sold abroad, the domestic reality within the Viking settlements was a grueling existence of endless toil and abuse. For women kept by the Vikings, life was a grind of back-breaking labor. As a thrall, a woman worked from the moment she woke until she collapsed. She was the first to rise to tend the fire and the last to sleep. Beyond cooking, she powered the massive textile industry. Creating the wool sails for Viking ships required thousands of hours of spinning and weaving, monotonous, painful work, largely done by enslaved women. Without their forced labor, the Viking fleets could never have sailed. But labor was only half the nightmare. The other half was systemic sexual exploitation. The sagas casually mention powerful men keeping friller concubines. These women, often high-born captives, lived in a humiliating limbo, serving the legitimate family while bearing illegitimate children who inherited their mother's enslaved status. Skeletal analysis shows thralls suffered from malnutrition and extreme physical stress, their bones twisted by heavy loads and repetitive motion. This widespread sexual exploitation didn't just ruin individual lives, it permanently altered the genetic map of entire nations. This sexual slavery built nations. Modern science has revealed the extent of this gendered violence through DNA. Studies on the population of Iceland show a shocking truth. While 80% of male settlers carried Norse DNA, over 62% of female settlers carried Gaelic DNA, originating from Ireland and Scotland. This genetic disparity paints a clear picture of mass abduction rather than migration. The implication is disturbing. These women didn't emigrate willingly. They were abducted from burning homes and transported across the ocean. They are the founding mothers of Iceland, but they arrived in chains. Their legacy is written in the blood of the modern population, a silent biological testament to a mass gendered migration fueled by violence. They survived the trauma to raise the next generation of the North Atlantic. While these women survived to become ancestors, others faced a final, fatal duty to their masters that is almost too horrific to contemplate. In the pagan Norse world, power demanded blood, and the line between property and person was non-existent, even in death. Female thralls were sometimes sacrificed to serve their masters in the afterlife. Ahmad ibn Fadlan recorded a horrific ritual in 922 AD involving the funeral of a Rus chieftain. He watched as a volunteer slave girl was intoxicated, sexually used by the chieftain's men as tribute, and then strangled and stabbed by an old woman known as the Angel of Death. During her murder, men beat their shields with sticks to drown out her screams, not to save her dignity, but to stop other slave girls from panicking and refusing to volunteer in the future. This wasn't a fantasy story. It was a funeral rite observed by a reliable witness. Archaeology confirms this. Graves across Scandinavia reveal decapitated bodies and women showing signs of hard labor buried alongside high-status figures, human sacrifices sent to serve in eternity. But recent excavations at Repton in England have uncovered an even darker twist, showing that this violence could be turned inward in moments of desperation. A mass grave at Repton from 986 AD contained 236 individuals, all female, but isotope analysis revealed they weren't local captives, they were Norse women. As Viking power collapsed in England and Anglo-Saxon forces pushed back, the Vikings faced a desperate choice. Rather than let their own wives and daughters be captured by the vengeful English, the warriors killed them. They knew exactly what awaited captured women because they had inflicted those same horrors on others for centuries. They applied their own execution methods, blunt force trauma, and strangulation to their own families. It was a mercy killing born of guilt and terror, a final act of control. It is a stark reminder that in the brutal equation of Viking warfare, women were always the ultimate casualties. One final detail from the grave encapsulates the entire tragedy of this era, carved into the bone of a victim. The Repton grave contained a skull with a runic inscription carved after death, 3 words in Old Norse: "Better this way." Someone took the time to justify the murder of their own child or wife, knowing that death was indeed preferable to the life of a captive in the brutal world they had helped create. This inscription is a chilling admission of the reality of the time. As we admire the Vikings for their ships and sagas, we must also see the shadow they cast. The silver that built their halls was paid for with the lives of women. The sails that carried them to America were woven by enslaved hands. History isn't just about the victors, it's about the victims who were silenced. The next time you see a glorified image of a Viking warrior, remember the silent, stolen women who made his world possible. Their story is the true history we must not forget. If you want to uncover more of history's darkest secrets, like this video and subscribe. What aspect of the Viking Age shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments below.